Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, I'm joined by Terri Behling, the Director of Communications for Haven for Hope, a homeless assistance facility offering safe sleeping quarters as well as basic needs for individuals and families in San Antonio. Terri, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. I'm glad to have you on. I have some personal experience with Haven for Hope, not as a client or anything, but we used to live in San Antonio, and um, my wife at the time worked for New Star, which
Oh, okay.
I guess owned by his name is I'm blanking on his name at the moment.
Bill Greehey.
Bill Greehey, there we go. And so I was very familiar with Haven for Hope, and then moved back to Austin. And you guys are often touted as such a fantastic organization. So I'm excited to be speaking with you. So why don't you give us just a little bit of background about who you are and Haven for Hope?
Sure. So Haven for Hope, we're celebrating 15 years this year, which is an exciting milestone. We opened in 2010 thanks to the vision of Bill Greehey. Um, we were designed to tackle not only the increase in homelessness that was happening in San Antonio, but look at it from a holistic standpoint by offering wraparound services. So, what Mr. Greehey and his committee that was formed to look at an effective model for San Antonio, they toured 200 different cities across the country and wanted to find out how other communities were addressing homeless issues. And while many communities might have a shelter or might have a day center providing, access to showers and food, what they found to be most successful is when you combined shelter with access to resources. So that's why we say we're more than a homeless shelter, we're a transformational campus. And the other important component of Haven is access to community resources for the community in which we serve and in which we operate. We are located in the poorest zip code of San Antonio. So our medical, dental, and vision services are not only available to our clients, but they're open to the community as well. And the YMCA located on our campus, there's access to the community for those services as well. So we're really kind of a wraparound, any resource somebody needs when experiencing homelessness, they are getting it either through Haven or our many partners on campus.
So you referred to Haven for Hope as as a shelter, and there's obviously, I mean, there's a lot of terminology in the homeless, I guess, services industry, and there's shelters, there's permanent supportive housing, there's other things as well. Um, so y'all are strictly a shelter. You're not permanent supportive housing.
The 22 acres that we sit on is, by HUD definitions, emergency shelter.
Okay.
We're designed to have 1,450 shelter beds spaces. And I say spaces because we have two sides of our campus. We have our low barrier South Campus, and we have the North Campus transformational campus, which is a little bit more residential. But in the true sense of the term, it's temporary shelter while folks are getting back on their feet. In terms of permanent supportive housing, we do not operate permanent supportive housing units, but we do have clients that go into those units, and we have caseworkers that continue to work with them after they've left Haven.
Okay. So I want to kind of start maybe a little bit pre Haven for Hope. What was the homeless situation in San Antonio like pre Haven for Hope? What sort of services were available? Why was Haven for Hope? Why was it so important for San Antonio? What was going on?
So it's my understanding, and I'll preface this with I moved to San Antonio in 2020. So
It's a
I
good time
I
to move to
don't
San Antonio. As good a time as any.
exactly. Why not move during a pandemic? It's a good time. So it's my understanding we had organizations that we still collaborate with today, SAM Ministries, offering shelter and transitional housing, especially for families. The Salvation Army has some shelter beds as well, serving individuals and families. And then we also have a number of organizations providing some day services. We have Corazon Day Center that offers meals, a place for people to come in, talk to caseworkers or get access to resources or learn about resources, but they don't provide the overnight component. And also, Christian Assistance Ministry has been around for quite some time, again, offering clothing, food, showers, toiletries, some of those basic needs. So while they're interacting with those clients, they're also providing information about resources in our communities. So we had a system in place, and the mayor at the time, Mayor Phil Harburger, had noticed an uptick in homelessness in San Antonio, and he had addressed it in his State of the City annual address and reached out to the business community and said, maybe we can collaborate and do something about it. So that's why Haven truly is a public-private partnership, because Mr. Greehey was able to bring in his resources and contacts as being a part of New Star Energy, and his philanthropic mind. He had the Greehey Family Foundation, so that was already kind of ingrained in our community. It was bringing all the resources together. So it was really selling the point that if somebody has access to what they need, ID recovery, substance use treatment, behavioral health treatment, access to benefits, access to job training, and then access to the different housing options, they're going to be more successful because they're getting it all in one place.
Yeah.
Whereas other communities that might be scattered around town and it's more difficult to navigate.
So I want to talk to you about sort of the programs that you'll offer and how that's developed over time. But I want to make sure that I sort of understand and the listeners understand sort of the how Haven for Hope works. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I was a homeless individual and maybe I know that substance abuse issues are certainly an issue in the homeless community. Y'all don't turn away those people. They can. Am I correct in my understanding that you can go there? Maybe you're just not like they don't get turned away.
Mhm.
It's a safe place, whatever. Maybe you're just not allowed to like access certain things until you clean up. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So
Okay, please.
it depends on the program that you're wanting to enroll in.
Okay.
So when I mentioned South Campus, our low barrier shelter, low barrier truly means it's low barrier to resources, right? So you could come in with no ID. You can be active in your addictions. You can't use inside our facility, inside our secured area, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not ready to address those issues, we are still going to provide a safe place for you to sleep indoors, access to 3 hot meals a day. You're going to have access to all the resources offered at Haven for Hope, either through us or our partners, but it's an optional engagement, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Sure.
So we're meeting people where they are. We are going to be connecting with them. We're going to be talking to them, talking about their options and their resources. And I want to make sure that I explain it's not a free for all, right? There's
Sure.
still rules. We have a life safety team 24/7 at our facilities. So when I say you can remain active in your addiction, if you're disruptive, if you're aggressive, all of those things, you're going to have some consequences, whether it's a temporary suspension or a permanent exit. We have to keep our other clients, staff, volunteers safe as well. So
Of course.
meeting them where they are and giving them that option to engage when they're ready, as opposed to our North Campus, where we do have a nonprofit partner on campus called Pay It Forward that offers 88 beds of sober living. So after you've been through a recovery program, you can choose to come to Haven and be enrolled in Pay It Forward's program. So you're going to have a sober living option for up to a year. North Campus is also where our families are. So if you're enrolled in any program on North Campus, you're agreeing to be sober while at Haven.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of the main difference of our two campuses. On the North Campus, we do have an ID requirement. We also have a Bexar County residency requirement because we are designed to serve Bexar County. And because of our funding mechanisms, that's our focus. But that being said, if you're on North Campus, there's an expectation that you're engaged in your housing and income plan.
Yeah.
So all the resources are the same no matter which side you're on. It's just some of the entry requirements may differ.
So, I don't want to forget to ask you about the Bear County residency requirement, but I want to, before we get there, talk more about the services and programs that Haven for Hope offers now
Mhm.
and sort of how that's developed over time.
Yes.
I'm sure that when it first opened more than a decade ago, things were a little different. So
Yes,
how has that
absolutely.
changed? What's offered and how has that changed?
It's evolved a lot.
Sure.
Our programming has evolved, our partnerships have evolved. When we first opened, partners ran a lot of the programs. So Center for Healthcare Services ran our low barrier shelter, SAM Ministries ran our residential. And just through the years, we had found it more efficient to let them be experts in their areas. And then we continued to hire staff and provide training to take over some of those programs. But say, for instance, we have a client that has a particular need that we at Haven staff do not provide. We are partnered with more than 80 other nonprofits in the community, 40 of whom have a presence on our campus, to where we could do like an easy handoff, right?
Yeah.
You're coming to Haven and you're fleeing domestic violence. We have a great partnership with I have to think of their name because I think of their acronym. So it's family
What's their
per
acronym?
oh FLFS. It's Florida, not Florida. I'm in Florida right now. Sorry. It's
Oh,
family prevention. I'll have to look it up
that's okay.
and get it for you. But we partner with an organization that deals in domestic violence, right?
Sure.
So they're right there on our campus providing those services. And they also run a battered women's shelter as well. So we have that opportunity. If Haven is not the right place for that individual, they might move to their shelter. So there's that constant evolution of what do our clients need and how can we provide that. One great example is our young adult program, which has been in existence about a year and a half now. We were always serving 18 to 24-year olds, but they were maybe intermingled with everyone else.
Yeah.
Their needs are going to be extremely different from a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old. So we did a lot of listening sessions and working with other partners in the community that cater to that population and said, what can we do to make Haven an option for you? And safety was their biggest concern. They wanted to be with their peers and they wanted access to resources to help them in their situation. So we created the young adult program and we have dedicated space on both sides of our campus with dedicated case managers working with them on their particular needs, which is going to be different than what our other clients need. And it's been very successful.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the I guess the young adult program there. My next question was going to be about how quickly can Haven for Hope sort of pivot to the needs of the community. Is it you recognize? I mean, is it what's the process? I mean, from my understanding, Haven for Hope does. They're very quick to do these things, very quick to make the changes necessary. You
Yeah.
have a lot of providers that you partner with, but if there's something missing or Haven for Hope, it's just more convenient. How quickly can you all pivot to that stuff?
We can pivot pretty quickly. But there are times where we have to step back too
Sure.
and look and say, and another reason why I say that is I mentioned our design capacity is 1,450. We've been operating over capacity for the past 3 years.
Whoa.
We're serving closer to an average of 1,700 a day versus 1,450 a day. So the need is great and the
Yeah.
need continues to grow in our community. And so now there's a lot of strategic planning going on of how can Haven adjust, but then how can other community partners make adjustments to increase shelter capacity within our community? What are some of the other programs and partners that we can get together with to make sure all the needs in our community are met? And that's going to be something that will change over time as San Antonio's population continues to increase. So does the numbers of folks experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
So it's really constantly looking at the trends and working together. We are a part of the San Antonio homeless response system, and we are working together in cold weather events, hot weather events. We're constantly communicating and finding out what others are seeing, what the other service providers are seeing, and then addressing it with the city and the county. How can we make it better in our community, if that makes sense?
No, that makes sense for sure. So the I want to ask the why the Haven for Hope model is so successful.
Mhm.
I mean, it's considered the sort of the gold standard in Texas and beyond. When people talk about, I mean, I'm in Austin, and we our homeless population is increasing, has been increasing for quite some time, and a lot of people in the community look to Haven for Hope, say, why can't we have something like that here? But
Mhm.
before we answer that question, I want to ask, you're talking about the homeless, you're operating at overcapacity, and the homeless issue is getting bigger.
Mhm.
That seems to be a national trend.
Mhm.
What is Haven for Hope's opinion on that? Why, in y'all's experience, why is that happening?
It
I mean, I'm sure that's maybe a podcast that could take, hours to talk
we
about.
could do a week-long podcast on that.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I mean it, and it's the same thing that we're seeing across the country. Lack of affordable housing, inflation,
Yeah.
the minimum wage not being a living wage. So the problem with homelessness is the complexity.
Sure.
Each individual is different. And when you talk about the success of Haven, we treat each individual differently, right? So when you come to Haven, you're going to get a person-centered plan that works for your situation. So what works for your situation might not be what is needed for another person's situation. So, and all of that takes time. It takes funding. It takes cooperation with all the parties involved. So it's difficult because I don't think nationally we're able to keep up with affordability. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that is probably the biggest issue in the city of San Antonio. The voters passed a bond to create more affordable housing, but that also takes time.
Yeah.
And once you have it, you have like our clients who come in and qualify for a housing voucher, whether it be, Section 8 housing or other vouchers that are out there and funded through different parties, you have to find a landlord willing to take it, accept that voucher, and then there's an inspection process to make sure that it's suitable housing, and all of that takes time. So I think there's a sense of there's a perception out there that individuals and families experiencing homelessness are lazy, don't want to work, don't don't want to get out of the situation, and we find that to be the opposite. They do, but they may not know where to go.
Sure.
And so that's part of Haven's success is having access to all those resources, kind of a one-stop shop. And we are very fortunate to have 200, not 200, 22 acres near downtown that we were able to transform into Haven for Hope. And not every community is going to have that. So that's what makes it difficult to address this more globally and on a national scale. But I believe what's making us most successful is the partnerships and the wraparound care that we offer and looking at the root cause of someone's homelessness.
Yeah.
That's important too. You got to address what happened, what was the trauma in their lives, how can we overcome that so they can leave Haven and be successful and not return to homelessness.
So, like I mentioned, I live in Austin, and people talk about Haven for Hope and sort of, having a Haven for Hope style model here in Austin. I'm wondering, can Haven for Hope, can that be replicated? Has it been tried and done successfully? Is that something that I'm sure y'all get a lot of requests for,
We do.
like
Yeah.
how do you guys do it? Help
Yeah.
us, right? What do
Yeah.
can it be replicated?
I think it can be, and I think that goes back to every community is going to be different. We were fortunate to have strong private-public partnership. You have to have the buy-in,
Yeah.
right? You have to have the buy-in of the community. And we still face those challenges today as a community where an affordable housing project is proposed, and while it's going through the process, there's opposition to it. And so every community is going to continue to battle that until we are able to truly have that education component of what causes homelessness, what does it mean, and change some of that perception moving forward that having affordable housing doesn't necessarily equate to lower property values, crime,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. So it can be replicated, and what we often tell folks who come and tour Haven from other communities is we were fortunate to have the magic sauce of the funding.
Yep.
We had a big funder behind it, but also the property, the space. So you might do a similar model, but it won't be as big.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're co-locating shelter with necessary resources, that's a good start.
Yeah.
And we just tell each community to look at what are the biggest resources needed for your homeless population. It's likely going to be the medical care, right? Or the substance use behavioral health care. And as long as you are creating those partnerships and getting clients that access, I think it can be successful.
Is there something to, going back to Bill Greehey being the founder, and I think that's what you're referring to when you talk about the funding at the beginning. Is there something to be said about, him individually, certainly, but also the founder's vision of what this looks like and him still being involved? Is there something to be said about that when it comes to y'all success?
Absolutely. We do not rely solely on public funding. And our split's probably about 70-30 right now. Our operating budget is 30 million a year, but we have a 70-30 split, 70% being what would be considered public funding, whether that's through HUD. We're wrapping up funding from the COVID era.
Yeah.
Um, Funds that were available, state funding, and then city and county funding and United Way. But then you look at our private funding and how helpful that is. When you talk about how quickly can we pivot, if we have access to grants and different foundations or private donors that aren't placing a restriction on what they're giving to us, we can create programs that do not have all of the different restrictions on it that you might have with some public funding, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
it does.
So having that diversity and having that mix, I think, is critical for any city or community trying to replicate our model. You have to have diversified funding and sustainable funding.
Yeah, for sure. The private funding, how important is y'all's success to acquiring that private funding? If I wanted to donate and I have, 10 different homeless programs to donate to, I mean, gosh, I'm going to look at whatever information I can to find the most successful one.
Yeah,
Is that pretty important to y'all?
super important.
Yeah.
It really is. And we encourage people to donate to any organization serving the homeless in our community. Our The way we're able to take your dollars further, or like I said, create programs that are needed in our community because of access to that private funding, it really is helpful. And I think it's helpful for our partners too. They have requirements for some of their grants and funding because they have access to our clients. Everyone's like meeting their goals, right? They're meeting their benchmarks because we're all together, and it's an easier access point
Yeah.
versus trying to communicate and partner with everyone spread out all over the city, and it's harder to get that census. So private funding is a critical component to Haven's model.
Yeah. So the private funding helps y'all pivot to, new strategies, new ideas, stuff like that. When Haven for Hope is looking for ideas, where do they generally come from? Is it locally? Is it, within the organization? How do y'all do that?
It's a little of both. We've implemented client town halls that we have quarterly. We're always listening. We're listening to our clients. We're listening to their feedback. If there's an issue that needs to be addressed at Haven itself, but then if it's an issue of they don't have access to something, once they're out in community again, lots and lots of listening sessions, focus groups, and just looking at again those trends. We have a great staff member who looks into all the data, right?
Yeah.
He's looking at the data all the time, identifying trends and looking at the data from a community-wide basis. And then what are we hearing from our other partners? If they see a need, but they don't have the capacity to fill it, how can we all work together to meet that need?
Yeah. Is there Are there other service models in the state that Haven for Hope, that y'all have a good working relationship with? They're doing good work to solve the problems of homelessness in their communities. Are there like who do y'all work with? I don't know, Austin or Houston or Dallas. Like what who do y'all look to as like, hey, they're doing good work too? Because y'all just, I mean,
That's a good question.
you guys just serve Bear County residents, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So, as a Travis County resident, if I'm homeless, I can't go down to Haven for Hope without proving somehow that I belong in Bear County.
You could go to our low barrier shelter.
Okay, there you go.
There's no residency requirement there, but yeah, I mean it's difficult. I We are talking to other cities and communities. I don't know how much, there's not necessarily a collaboration there, but there is best management practices, right? So if our staff are attending conferences in these different communities or working with the statewide associations addressing homelessness, we're working with our continuum of care agency close to home in our community who talks to other continuum of cares in other communities because every community has one. That's how the HUD funding gets funneled into a community. So we've definitely had conversations with the folks in Dallas and Austin and Houston, and we've all looked at what are some best management practices, what's working in your community that could be replicated in ours.
So the other one's foundation here in Austin, Chris Baker, I've interviewed him on this show, and it seems like he's doing good work. And it seems like there's maybe some similarities in approach and in philosophy and how to do this stuff. I know there's certainly differences, but I just looking at them and looking at you guys and looking and just curious what's going on in other cities because I know this problem is growing across the state, and of course we have the 89th Texas legislature just started this week. They'll be looking into the homeless issues here in the states or in the state, and just kind of curious, what's working in other places, right? And what's necessary in Travis County or Harris County may be different than Bear County.
Right.
And so I wanted to sort of pick your brain about that a little bit. So you talked about funding and the 70-30 split is kind of what you'll have. When it comes to the public funding, how are how strict are the strings? How tight are they? If
I
that
think
makes
it, yeah, it depends on the funding source.
sure.
And I'm not overly familiar with some of those restrictions, but there's always reporting requirements. There's metrics that you're tracking. If it's something that is specific to the type of programming being offered, that would be another example of a restriction. Whereas if you have unrestricted, you can hire more case managers to do specific case management for a certain population. You know what I mean? So it really depends on the funding source.
Yeah, of course. Speaking of the Texas legislature starting up this week,
Mhm.
we've gotten past the the speaker's race and all that other stuff, and now they're down to business getting stuff done. I know that there's senators and representatives out there that are, you know, presenting bills, filing bills that have to do with the homeless in Texas. Are y'all paying close attention to those? Do y'all get involved at all? Are there hopes, goals that y'all have for this 89th legislature?
Absolutely. We're following it all the time. I know our CEO and President Kim Jeffries goes to Austin often during the legislative session and during committee weeks and has provided testimony in committee hearings. So, we're asked what our best management practices are and what it looks like for us and how it works in our community. And so we are very transparent with all of that information. And if what we're doing can help other communities in Texas, we want people to have access to that information. So
Yeah.
absolutely, we're following every bill that is touching on homelessness, we're going to be following.
Do you have any information about stuff that Haven for Hope would like to see happen in the Texas legislature? I don't know. Maybe that's proprietary. Maybe you don't want to reveal your cards. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't been involved in that process,
Okay.
so I can't
No,
really
that's totally
speak
fine.
to that. But I think increase in funding, what nonprofit wouldn't say that? Increase in funding to address the issue, but also again looking at affordable housing and looking at living wages and looking at all of the factors, looking at more emphasis on prevention. Maybe if we could be tackling some prevention measures and putting more focus on that as well to prevent people from entering into the system and experiencing homelessness would be a great win for everyone in Texas.
Yeah. Terri Behling, I appreciate you taking the time. Is there a website or social media that you want to plug?
Absolutely. It is havenforhope.org.
Okay.
And we are on every social media platform. So our links are available on the website. There's also a virtual tour on our website that I think really kind of shows the scope of what we offer at Haven for Hope. And I encourage anyone listening to this podcast, if you're ever in San Antonio, please come by and take a tour. It really does help understand the scope of what we're doing and some of the issues that our clients are facing when you come and take a tour of our campus.
Yeah. Well, Terri Behling, Director of Communications for Haven for Hope, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.